Well, hello and welcome to the Two Stewards podcast. My name is Mark from Joy Hill Property Management.
And I'm Brent from Good Stewards, Inc.
So today we're just going to dive into what we do a little bit, and I'm going to interview Brent and find out exactly what he does at Good Stewards, Inc. So, Brent, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And yeah, let's talk about what you do. So in a nutshell, what do you do over at Good Stewards?
Real estate investing. So
Okay.
That's a pretty broad question. And so we have a bit of a philosophy. Good Stewards obviously is a name that comes from the biblical principles of stewardship. And to us, everything that we have is a gift, right? We've been given our financial resources. We've been given time. Relationships. So all these different things are blessings, and we have to use them accordingly, right? So one of the ways that we see as a good opportunity to steward our financial blessings and our time is through real estate investing. And we discussed some of the reasons for real estate investing in the last episode. We'll probably dive into them more as we go along, but we chose real estate investing. It definitely aligns with our skill sets and our interests. And our goal is to really help the average investor, the average kind of middle-class family and person to access real estate investing. Because I guess to paint a picture, maybe 10, 15 years ago, real estate was not so mainstream, and it was a little bit more attainable actually for the average person to kind of buy a property and put tenants in it. You could just kind of pick any property off the street and put tenants in it, and the rent would cover the expenses, and you'd be off to the races. You have yourself a pretty good investment property set up. And lately it's been getting more and more challenging for the average person to access real estate. So what we kind of specialize in is taking somebody's hand and going alongside them through the whole process of finding a property. Where should I look? What should I be looking for? And then, even the financing side of it, of like, how do I get my finances set up to be able to start buying properties, all the way through to after you've made the acquisition to doing any renovations. So a lot of the times we're intensifying the property, adding units, and that's a way to allow the property to have more cash flow, so it's more feasible. So like I said, 15 years ago, somebody could buy a rental property and just put a single tenant in it. Now, because of where prices are at, interest rates are at, and demand, a lot of population growth, there's so much demand for these properties that that's not feasible anymore. So you have to be putting in additional units. You have to be optimizing the property, and we kind of call that the highest and best use of the land, right? So when you're buying a piece of land, you're going to be optimizing it, seeing how much rent you can get from that piece of land. And that usually requires a little bit more expertise than just, a weekend warrior with a hammer kind of thing, right? And a lot of people don't have the time to put in to do all that work. And what we're doing, we're putting in legal basements, we're putting legal backyard suites, some of these strategies, and that requires getting drawings done, permits, and so it's a bit to bite off for the average person. So that's kind of where we step in, and our company really tries to make that whole process easy. You just come to us, we work alongside you to get that done. And at the end of the day, you own an asset that, we offer property management services for long-term rentals. And so we kind of take care of everything. And the goal is to be able to have people build a portfolio over time that they're happy with and that they can hold on to for the long term. So that's kind of in a nutshell everything.
So,
I don't have any more specific questions. But
I have lots. So we're, like you raise a good point in especially in the area that we're in, 10, 15 years, probably a little bit over 10 years ago, my wife and I bought our first house together. and had a basement suite, and we rented it out. And that was cool. It was, half the basement was finished, and that was the suite, and that was an easy entree for us into the market. House prices were probably a third of what they are now. Apples to apples. So yeah, it was a little bit different. It would, looking at it now, yeah, sure, with experience, we could probably do that again. But let's say, you've got a young couple, and they have saved up or come up with enough money, just hypothetical here, to get a second property, an investment property. So they're going to come to you, and they're going to say, hey, we think we should buy another property. What can you do for us? Walk me through the process a little bit, right, sort of from the beginning.
So that's kind of a good example of who the people that we could help the most, because, a lot of people do own their own home. And, if it's a husband and wife and they're both working, so they have pretty good incomes, maybe they're putting their kids through school, and they're kind of in that phase of life where they've got their house, they've paid down a good portion of it, or maybe they bought it 10 years ago, and there's some equity saved up there. So what we would help them do is get them set up with the home equity line of credit on their house, to be able to borrow money from their house to make the purchase of the investment property. Most people don't have a big pile of cash sitting around, and they can't just pull out their RSPs and other investments right away. So probably the best way to access money is through your own home's equity. And once you get that loan set up, that HELOC, you can go out and make a purchase and use those proceeds as the down payment on the investment property. And if you have a big enough, HELOC, you can probably use some of that for the renovations as well. So a lot of the properties that we're doing, there are quite significant renovations, because we're trying to buy distressed properties that need a lot of work. And also we're adding like a whole kitchen in the basement, bathrooms, and we usually redo everything, to be honest, to bring it up to a very high standard. So I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of forget what your question was.
Yeah, it did. So let's get some context here. So in our specific area, so if we're in the Hamilton area, what is the kind of budget we're looking at here? And are there alternative ways to fund the renovation part? Getting the down payment to buy a house is one thing, doing the renos. And so what would that all cost in this area? Just an average home.
Yeah, so prices have, for the actual homes, seem to be coming down in the last 6 months. So we always try to keep tabs on the actual market, where home prices are, and then have streams for off-market deals as well, where you might be able to get a reduced price, something that a private seller is willing to negotiate a price that's lower. Maybe it's better terms. So there's creative ways to actually do the purchase where we can come up with a better purchase price. Obviously, we're not competing with other people. Like when we make an offer on a house, we're kind of doing the numbers, and we decide what number that house is worth to us for the investment to work, and we offer that. And it kind of takes all of the emotions out of it, because you're not, it's not your forever home. You're not going to live there. It's an investment property. The numbers have to make sense, and that's where you start. So when we make an offer, it is property specific, so it's hard to kind of just generalize, but I would say right now it's, probably in the 650 range. Some of these properties, a lot of the times you're looking for an upside potential, right? Like when you buy a piece of land, you're stuck with that thing for a long time. And that's kind of our motto, is it's long-term investing. So you buy it and you're committed, right? We don't really do flips and these other types of investments where you're buying it and then you usually sell it within a couple of years. So the purpose is for the investor to build a portfolio and to have long-term wealth for generations, for their kids, for their family, for their community. So that's what we're kind of buying. So when we go in and buy, we obviously look at, what could this property become? And then there's a variable there, like, what would it cost to make it that? And is it worth it? So all those numbers kind of go in a hat and we're into our spreadsheet, our very sophisticated hat-like spreadsheet. And we kind of go back and forth in terms of the investors' risk tolerance, because some of these projects do require pretty significant renovations. There's actually, we could do multiple phases as well, because for some properties you can buy the house, it's a single family dwelling, and you can convert the basement to an apartment, so you have 2 legal units. But some of the lots lend themselves to, a backyard suite, like a third separate detached dwelling unit. So that could be something that, say, is a bonus feature on your piece of land. So you're buying this now, and hopefully once you've done the renovations, it cash flows, and then you go, maybe in 5 years you've saved up enough money, or you have some equity built up in the investment property, you can refinance and build the actual backyard suite. So the construction costs and all that, like it does vary too, because some investors do want to kind of minimize those expenses, and some investors, see the long term and see the value of putting in nicer stuff and doing more significant renovation. So that's kind of where we have been lining up, is on the more significant renovation side of things, and that's 200 plus for a house most of the time.
So that would be like doing the whole house, adding a basement suite. Are there any things that that you kind of insist on doing that might be more structural, or anything really that investors don't always see the value of?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of investment properties over the years and looked at them and saw them, just through posts on, on Marketplace or whatever. And you can run the numbers and make it work by just kind of putting lipstick on a pig sort of thing, right? And we've done that in the past as well. And I've generally found that the tenant quality, when you do a cheap renovation and you cut corners and you don't kind of maximize the potential of your land and your home, then you end up with tenants that cause problems or aren't the greatest. And generally, I find that here in Ontario, the landlord tenant board, like you're restricted. We can't evict tenants unless there's some serious problems going on, they're not paying rent. But the process is very onerous and difficult. So when you pick tenants, when you attract tenants, it's very important to find good ones. And we generally try to create units that will attract tenants that are going places, I like to say. So they're upward mobile. They're going to be here for a short period of time, and then they're going to move out because they know why they're living here. It's just kind of, I'm here for 1 to 2 to 3 years because I'm saving up money to do this, and then I'm going to go to this province and I'm going to start a business or whatever, right? And maybe it's not exactly that profile, but they definitely have, a future in mind, and it's not in our rental unit. So, so to attract those tenants, we have to create a space that, that is nice and clean and comfortable, well designed, well laid out. Everything has its place and its purpose. And some of these other units where you're just painting the walls and putting some trim up don't really cut it to get those tenants we find. So
yeah, and I guess the other benefit to that as well, if you have upwardly mobile, maybe professional tenants, is that you're not stuck with the same tenant for 10 years.
Yeah, so that allows us to raise the rent, right?
Yeah, which in a rent-controlled area like Ontario is pretty critical, especially if you either have a variable rate mortgage or just in general, if you want to keep up to market rent, that's tougher. And we see that too in some of the places we manage, right? And like we've got 1 or 2 units that are, lipstick on a pig, for lack of a better word, right? And the tenant that you attract Everybody needs a place to live.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong,
100%.
but it's a different, certainly a different demographic, and they tend to stay. Like they're not leaving if they find a place that's more affordable, because it's got to be more affordable. They're never leaving, so it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, and it doesn't get better because after they're there for 5 years, the market rents have gone up. So if they were to actually move on to a different unit, a lot of the times, we have a unit that we've rented out for 8-9 years or whatever, and they would be paying basically double if they moved out, or very close to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So into a similar kind of size unit in that area, right? So a lot of the times, tenants are forced to make those decisions of, do I move and pay double, or a significant percentage more, or live in a lower quality unit further away from my job, further away from my family, or do I make the decision to just stay here because it might not be ideal, it might not work exactly, but it definitely is cheap, right? So yeah, attracting tenants for us is about finding people that are willing to pay more because they value the things that we provide, and they're not here for 10 years, they're here for 2 or 3 years. So we do get more turnover, generally speaking, which can be more work as well, but it's also, it's not every day like Airbnbs. We'll talk about your stuff. The turnover that you get in that industry is a little bit different, but this is still every 1 to 2 to 3 years. Somebody important emailed you.
I'm a pretty important guy, let me tell you. So let me throw a curveball at you. We're talking about, how to kind of manage your units, your portfolio with a view to keeping on top of market rents, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at any sort of tenants rates groups, there's a common thread that, landlords are parasites in general. Never mind that private landlords provide something like 90% of all the housing stock. So, but that landlords shouldn't be making money off of housing. Do you have any a take on that?
In terms of charging high rents for?
Yeah, we talk about staying on top of market rent, and that's determined by the market, I guess. But people out there are saying, no, you should provide affordable housing for everybody and anybody, and it's your choice to get into real estate and to buy a place. And landlords basically should not profit from providing housing.
Right. Yeah, that's a bit of a curveball. So affordable housing is, what does that actually mean, right? Because affordable is different for everybody, right? Some people can afford more and choose to live in something, way below their means, and that might be commendable, but it requires sacrifice. And and then there's other people who live beyond their means and they get burned. So it's up to them. It's their decision ultimately where they're going to live. We've had units on the market and the price is, maybe it's a higher end of the market, but we get applications or inquiries from all kinds of people, right? And we generally ask, what is your income or household income for that unit? Like, how do you think you're going to pay for this unit? And some people, their income is sufficient to pay for it, in my opinion. Like they have a bit of bandwidth and they can afford to pay the rent. And other people clearly don't have the money and they're applying to something that's, very on the high end of the market, right? Mm-hmm. So not for me to judge all their financial decisions. Like maybe they have money that I don't know about or whatever, but their stated income, it's beyond their means, right? So, I know my wife and I, when we got married, we tried to find the cheapest place. We both worked, we both had, decent income. She was a nurse and I was in design. So we had good incomes for our age and, but we still tried to find something that was below our means, just, try to be prudent with your money. So, I see both sides of that. And we're trying to fill that spot in the market that is for people who want to appreciate good, clean, comfortable, quiet place to live with nice finishes. A lot of the tenants that we have I can't afford to live in our units, but they have like nicer furniture than I do, and they drive a fancy car, but that's what they want to do, right? And that's what they value, and they want to have people over to their house and have family and company over, and they place a high value on, I don't know if it's that image, but it's a nice place to live, right? So it's like it's their home, and they treat it with more respect. So I don't know if that answers your question in a roundabout way, but you throw curveballs at me, you throw them right back.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess like one of and this is getting a little bit off track, but like, is it ethical to make money off of housing? I guess that's a question, because people say, housing is a universal human right. So yeah, but on the flip side, and that maybe, the government should provide all housing. We know what happens when the government tries to provide housing. It actually makes it less affordable. Because the amount that they spend on building it and like everything that happens. So the most successful things that I've seen for affordable housing are usually public-private partnerships, like Indwell in Hamilton.
Right. Yeah.
Does a ton of work around. Yeah, they make nice units and good housing for people. And they're not for profit, but that's a very small portion of the market. So is it ethical to make money from housing?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't even know where to take that. I'm going to say you're making money because a lot of the times, like there's the other side of the coin is there's a big expenditure and a big risk that's involved, right? So someone say, you're making money from housing, but at the same time, like, it might have costed you like, several $100,000 of money and opportunity costs that you put in just to own this asset that someone else didn't do. So you outcompeted the market to get it in the first place, and you put all the hard work into making it what it is. And there's an appetite for somebody to rent it. So in that perspective, I think, it's ethical to do it. It's a business, just like anything else, right? You're providing a service, housing, to a customer, a tenant, and they're willing to pay for it. It's not like you're forcing them to live there. So obviously, if you put that on the market and there was nobody there to rent it, then we would have to lower our price to the, like you said, the affordable house range. Like, if you had everyone had affordable housing, then So
I think a lot of that also stems from lack of understanding. That's kind of where I'm asking some questions about, like, what does it cost to actually get a place and then to renovate it to the point where, and maybe it's not, you're going probably a little more high end, but like even something that is just
100,000, I would say is a good range to consider your all-in costs when you're buying something, you're renovating it, and you're carrying it for the duration of the renovations. Because a lot of the times you don't have the cash, so you're actually having to borrow money to do all that. And you don't have any income during the renovation period. So you have to carry that property, and that has interest costs as well. You have utility costs, you still have to pay the property taxes. So that's where a lot of investors, it's a big risk, right? So you get into the process and, for the first 6 months or 4 months or however long the renovation takes, you're bleeding money, right? So you have to be able to handle that. And when you're all in, like, maybe you're $500,000. And when we're done the project, we generally go back to the bank and we get a new loan for what it's worth, and we're able to pull out some money, but you're still sitting on, $250,000, whatever, right? So like you said, it does take a lot out of people to invest. Yeah.
So for providing housing for 1 or 2 families, and maybe 3 if you can add a garden suite, that's like that's a significant amount of money. And especially if you're talking about a middle-class investor, right? I mean, people, I think, have this picture of landlords as like Mr. Moneybags, just somebody who comes along and is just has all this money to spend. And like, what is the typical profile of the person that you're dealing with? Is it Mr. Moneybags? Scrooge McDuck?
You know what? So we thought a lot about this as well, because the people who have a lot of money, maybe they're business owners and they've made some wealth over the years, and they've kind of learned the experience, and they've learned the value of money, the value of investing and taking risks. So those people, we've worked with investors like that who, to them, they see a property come up or like, we make a suggestion, like this is a property that we think would align with your goals. And to them, it's a snap decision because they already know why they're investing and what the advantages are and what the risks are, and they make that decision very quickly. But to them, generally, we're one of many investments for them, right? So we're having an impact in their life. We're improving their financial future, but you're making the rich richer. So from our perspective, the people we like to work with the most are people that take more time to educate. They're unaware of the value of investing and some of the benefits and drawbacks of it. And we can really shape their future in a way that they don't even understand because, like you said, they're a middle class, middle-aged family. Generally, they have some equity in a home, like their primary residence, and that works well. They're looking to retirement with these eyes going, hey, am I going to have enough to make it when I'm retired? What should I do now? I have a little bit of time to think and breathe. I'm not stressed out about my mortgage payments anymore. And kind of you're idling there, right? And you're not sure. Mm-hmm. So that's where we can step in and really move the needle for them. And the decision to invest, in your 40s, 30s, 40s, could make a big difference in your financial future when you're, 50, 60, right? Because, time in the market, not timing the market, but so time spent in the market is where you're going to build wealth. So, in terms of a profile, I would say kind of a middle-aged family, and they have a house is kind of our target, and that's worked really well. So.
And I guess like everything you've outlined, there's risk. So without that risk reward thing, would we get more housing in this province? I'm going to take a risk and spend a bunch of money, and I hope that I get that reward. And if someone's working with you, you kind of mitigate all those risks to make sure that you're on the best side of that deal as possible. But without that reward, is there an incentive for people to create housing?
Yeah, there's less incentive. I think the government says they build housing, but ultimately they create the structure or the environment in which private investors and individuals can build housing or not. So, we're in Southern Ontario and Hamilton, and we have to deal with the municipality. So they have their own bylaws and regulations. They obviously have targets for density as well. So here in the city, we recently decided not to expand the boundary to farmland a couple years back. And then, that means where's the population going to go? They're going to go in the city. So the government kind of creates the environment and the regulations, the regulatory framework for private investors like you and I and the investors we work with to be able to go in and create housing units. So without that, it's just the government building houses, and I've never seen the government build a house. And if it did, it would probably be the most expensive.
I have, every once in a while, you'll get an announcement from the Minister of Housing, big announcement coming Tuesday, right? Yeah. And we created 19 units.
Yeah.
We're short, 250,000 just in Ontario.
Yeah.
Good work. And that cost you twice what it would cost a regular investor.
There seems to be a miscommunication between immigration on the one hand from the federal government and the housing supply, creating new housing units on the local level.
Mm-hmm.
So if the federal government decides, hey, we're going to pump more people into this country, and it doesn't translate to the provinces and the municipalities saying this is where they're going to go, then they kind of go where they want, but that drives house prices up everywhere, right? If there's no adequate housing supply. So we can talk about that too, because it's a bit of a crisis, and that's kind of the trend we're riding as well with our business. So for investors to be able to take advantage of some of these population trends and the lack of housing supply by creating housing options for a growing population is a huge, huge advantage.
Yeah, it's been a big focus of the Ford government as well. People have criticized this, but when it comes down to it, we are so short of housing that, we have to intensify. And even that, there's always NIMBYs, right? Not in my backyard. We need more housing, but not where I live. So you talked a little bit about municipalities. And so, again, in Hamilton, where we're located, and this would be mirrored in a lot of other places, there's pilot projects being rolled out to basically to license every single rental suite in the city, right? And this is only a couple of wards right now, but I know we've got some clients in those wards. And so that'll involve, especially if it's a duplex, getting the fire safety done. That's the biggest focus, I think, which makes sense, right? Let's make sure everything is safe. And especially in Hamilton, basement suites have been a thing for a long time, but maybe in the past 10 to 20% were actually legal. Mm-hmm. And when I say legal, I don't mean it's illegal, but where it's been approved by inspectors and fire marshal and all that. So they're working to get that process done. So what is that process like? Because I haven't gone through that really, to add a second suite to a house and make it legal.
Right. Yeah. Legal in quotation marks. Yeah. So I feel first, the reason why you make it legal, when we buy a property that's a single family dwelling, the house is not set up for multiple units, multiple tenants. So you might be able to put a big family in there or two families, but they would have to be under the same household, they use the same kitchen kind of thing. And so if you put a separate unit in there, now all of a sudden you introduce you have issues between units. You have sound transfer, you have fire transfer. So you might have a situation where tenants are light a fire in the basement for some reason, and that transfers to the upstairs unit. But that's a completely separate, self-contained unit. So how does the city address all that? Well, they have the building code that kind of outlines the guidelines of what is and what is not permitted when you're converting from a single-family home to a two-family dwelling. So if you do want to convert, a lot of the times you have to find a suitable property, first of all, because there are properties that it's basically way too expensive to convert. So, you can kind of convert whatever you want, but if you don't have the ceiling height, for example, you'll be digging down and underpinning the foundation. And so we've done some of that where the numbers make sense to do all these expensive renovations, but generally speaking, we try to find a property that meets the criteria as much as possible. So what you do is once you've found the property, you have to get building permits. And in order to get a building permit, you have to comply with the zoning bylaws, right? So obviously try to find property in the right zoning that permits it, because there are zonings where more density is permitted. So you could even add more units. So you obviously want to check the zoning of your property before you start. But the zoning requires that you have parking, for example. So if you have to have a parking spot, what is a legally defined parking spot? Because a lot of people say, I got a parking in my front yard. Yeah, well, does the city approve that as a legal parking spot? And would they approve that on an inspection? Or would the plans reviewer, when he's looking over your drawings, say, yeah, no, you're good. So there's legal definitions for all of these different things. And if you don't meet those zoning requirements, then you need to apply for a minor variance. And that's a little bit more of an onerous process. But yeah, you generally won't get a building permit until you clear all of those issues first. And you have to go through it's a public process. So you're going to have a hearing date at the city. They've been doing Zoom calls lately, so the neighbors can have input, like public consultation. So there's a notice that goes out to everybody, said, hey, this guy down the road is hoping to put a basement apartment in. He doesn't have parking. He's looking to do this. Do you have any input? And so, yeah, it can be a little bit political. And you mentioned NIMBYs, like not in my backyard. Yeah, there's a lot of pushback in some areas, right? Because, if you don't meet the requirements, people can raise their hands. They don't like this. But generally in Hamilton, things have been going through pretty smoothly on that front. But it does take time and it's added cost. So there's a cost to that application and time to that process. But yeah, once you get that through, then you're into building permit stuff, which is, fire rating. So how do you separate the units? And every municipality, we've done jobs in St. Catharines as well. Different municipalities have different requirements and ways of interpreting the building code. So it's kind of wide, but so that's something to consider too. If you're looking to buy a property in a certain area, kind of understanding what that city has a reputation for. Every city has their thing, right? So there'd be fire, there's ceiling height, like we talked about, egress. So point of egress, be able to get out safely out of the unit. A lot of times there's interconnected smoke detectors. So these sorts of things, right? Where you have to meet all these building code requirements. So for somebody taking an existing basement apartment and converting it, there is some allowances for grandfathering in building materials that are already installed. Mm-hmm. Some cities have like more stringent requirements, like they'll make you rip the drywall down if it's not proper. But yeah, we haven't had too many issues in Hamilton with that.
So there's a ton of things you got to think about before you even, like you talked about renter profile, right? That's one, and then selecting the property. And I fell asleep somewhere between like parking spots and minor variance.
Yeah, me too.
Well, because I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. That's not my personality, right? Like oh man, you tell me all this stuff. I'm like, there's no way I could never do it. Forget it, right?
Yeah. Well, so that my response to that, just that comment quickly before you ask the next question is, that's where you add value, because a lot of people, like myself included, that's not the fun part, right? Is going with the city and dealing with all these issues and neighbors and building code. But that's where value is added, right? So if you do go through the process, now all of a sudden you've increased the value of your property. It depends where it is and what it is, but hey, you can increase the value of your property quite significantly just by going through that process, right? And legalizing it. So that's my comment on that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking the old days of you buy a place and throw some drywall up and get someone in the basement and someone in the main level are probably kind of gone.
People do that, and it happens. Generally, I've heard from people too, hey, I'm putting in a basement apartment. What should I do? Yeah. And I advise them to get a permit because of these advantages, right? Like you can get higher rent usually because people think it's safe. You can, get more value out of your property because buyers think it's safer and better, and the city, appraisers value it more, so you can refinance it better. So all these different reasons, right? But I don't even know where I was going with this.
Well, have you, I don't know, have you had either a client or maybe someone you've talked to who's had one of these basement apartments and the tenant called in and complained?
No, I
and the city inspected.
That, but yeah, so people do illegal units. The temptation is to do it because the numbers work better because I don't have to deal with the city. I don't have to get a permit to do the extra fire rating or whatever. And I don't know. As a business, we do everything above board, and we try to do like legal units. And I've heard definitely if it's your own property and you live there and you put your brother in the basement, there's definitely an argument to be made. Hey, I'm just like I know the guy, whatever.
Yeah.
Put him in there, right? So, but we try to say make things safe and proper. Like even if you don't get a building permit, still put in the right fire separation and whatnot. So it is safe. It is up to building code.
I can just imagine with the city like enforcing a lot more of this licensing.
They have made it easier, right? They've made it easier to apply and to get the permits than it used to be because it was a fairly new thing. So back several years ago, it was like the city didn't even know how to handle all these permit applications. So now they have a bit of a system, and it's still a lot more work than it was before. But now, it's they're handling it better. So.
Yeah. No, but I have talked to people who ran into some problems with an undeclared or an illegal basement unit, and city came in and they had to do a lot of work, which would have been a lot easier to do.
Yeah, generally you do
up
on fair
front.
terms too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it can throw a monkey wrench into things. That's why I like to do it all up front. The other thing is when you buy a property, generally you buy it and it's vacant. So the opportunity to have a vacant property in terms of renovating it is nice, right? Because then like if I need to shut the furnace off, do some HVAC work, I don't have to disturb tenants. If I'm cutting concrete and there's dust everywhere, like all of these things, just, get all the construction done at once, get it out of the way, and then you can put tenants in it and it's ready to go and you don't have to go back, right? So, but that was my kind of philosophy on that too. So.
Yeah. So it can be a daunting process, I think, right? From start to finish, from just the initial plans to selecting the house to then actually doing the renovations, getting the permits, finalizing, dealing with trades.
Yeah.
That's another one too, right?
So, if you know a lot of people and you're pulling favors, that works. But it works once. Hey, I helped you carry drywall for this project. Yeah, I got another one.
Yeah.
And trades can be a big thing too, because what questions do you ask? How do you deal with them? What's a fair price to pay? What should I expect in terms of quality or service? So if you've never renovated before, that's a whole can of worms. Like it just it could be kind of daunting. So, but it's that's where you achieve, like we talked about before, leverage of time. Like you can leverage someone else's time too, right? Like you could do a lot of the work yourself and save money, but at the end of the day, like your time is valuable as well. So I look at it kind of like, if I was drywalling the house all day, at an hourly wage, that's what I'm doing with my time, and I have to decide is that the best use of my time. Like it's what I want to be doing. I'm not cut out for that. I'm not very good at drywall, to be honest, but the people who are can do it much quicker and they can get things done, and your project runs a lot smoother and gets done faster, professional result, and you're on to the next thing, right? So that's the way we look at it too, right? Having trades that are available, that are ready to go, that are professional, and you put them in on a project, and a lot of our trades have done it before. So, if you do it yourself, a lot of times you're running into issues with inspectors. Like, I didn't know the inspector wanted to see this, so now I'm going to have to rip that all out and redo it this way. And I've heard a lot of stories too where people make those mistakes themselves, and then, they hire a professional and he gets it done in 5 minutes because he's done it 100 times, right?
Yeah.
There's value in having good trades and a good network of trades. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. I think it's a made-up story, but a steamship that's not running. They've tried everything to get it going, and finally, this is old-timey, by the way, steamship. I don't think we have those anymore. That's another episode. How does a steamship work? But finally, they get a professional who comes in and looks at it, walks around, checks it out for an hour, and then bangs in a specific spot with a wrench. Says, okay, you're good. That'll be $5,000. And you're like, $5,000? All you did was hit the side with a wrench, and it fixed it.
Of steamships,
yes,
would have been.
That was a lot of dollars, right? It was probably paid in gold or something. And he's like, it was $1 for banging the wrench, and the rest, the other $4,999, was for knowing where to hit it.
Yeah,
and it's kind of the same thing with a professional, right? Because people will get the quote up front and be like, "That's a lot of money for a bathroom."
Yeah.
Then they do it themselves and screw it up and end up paying twice as much as they would have.
And back in the first property or first couple properties we bought, I don't know how many times I drove to Home Depot.
Yeah.
There's a little goat path going from my house to Home Depot with drywall dust all the way up the highway.
Oh yeah, I guess I need some drywall screws, or I guess I need outlets. Oh man, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so that's a pretty good process. I had a question for you, which I've forgotten. But I don't know. Is there anything else you want to add just about that process, or kind of what you guys do for people to bring value?
Yeah, not so much about the process. Like the strategy is definitely to help these people to acquire an asset that will improve their financial future over the long term. So zooming out a bit of a macro view of everything, there's the nitty gritty of like building the house and whatnot and finding out which one. But at the end of the day, we're really trying to use your wealth that you have, or use your savings, use your equity to buy an asset that's going to appreciate in value. We'll definitely talk about this more about what the value of real estate is. But this house goes up in value. You pay down the debt on it over time using the tenant's money, and you're going to hold that for a long period of time. So, hopefully you have the appetite for another property down the road, and you come back to us because you like the process. But that's kind of the goal and the macro strategy is buy assets and hold them long term and build your wealth. It's a bit about us.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I guess in that process, really, especially if you're doing a line of credit, you're turning your house into 2 houses.
Yeah.
And then maybe 3 houses and maybe 4 houses without really, especially if you're doing a longer process, without putting additional capital in, usually, unless you want to accelerate that process. But you can leverage equity from each property, generally
some
speaking.
People say, I did one. Hey, Dad, this worked out really good. Would you like to put in on the next one? And then they're off to the races. So, then you start getting into a little bit more risk because you're borrowing other people's money. But, it definitely expedites the process of growing the wealth, because the more you can acquire sooner, the easier. Then time starts ticking, and you're paying down debt. Your asset is growing in value, there's undulations along the way, like we've seen recently, where prices kind of soften a bit because interest rates are high. So we expect that to be, there's some volatility along the way, but generally hold the asset, and you'll do well. So.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're providing safe housing for families.
There's a lot of satisfaction in that too. Like to see the tenants enjoying the space, and like for us, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Like, these people really appreciate it, and they take care of it. They treat it as their home, and they get a lot of positive feedback that way. It's really nice.
Cool, good. Well, I think we got to wrap up there.
All right.
And where can people get a hold of you, Brent?
So my email is brent@goodstewards.ca. You can check out our website, goodstewards.ca. We have a contact page there as well. It's a little bit about us. And then you can find us on Instagram as well. We've been posting stuff. I think it's Good Stewards Inc. Feel free to check us out, reach out, drop a line, and we'd love to chat with you.
Absolutely. And if you're listening out there and you want to learn a little bit more about short or midterm rentals, you can get hold of us at joyhill.ca or markandkirsten.ca. Throw a submission in there. We'll get the email and we will get back to you. So thank you for listening to another episode of The Two Stewards, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.